What's up guys, Agent here with another PTS video, and today we're going to be talking about the new set known as Elemental Catalyst. Elemental Catalyst is a light armor set that you can get from one of the new dungeons that are coming out with this latest DLC patch. It is coming from the dungeon known as Stone Garden. What does the set do exactly? Well, here is the set bonuses here. So the 2, 3, 4 piece look pretty standard. It's just your typical Magicka DPS oriented set here, Magicka and Spell Crit. But the 5 piece is really where this set starts to essentially, I don't want to say break the meta, but it becomes very broken, and it is probably going to be a set that you want to have in every single organized trial group. So whenever you deal Flame, Shock, or Frost damage, you apply a stack of Flame, Shock, or Frost weakness to the enemy for 5 seconds. Each stack of an elemental weakness increases their critical damage taken by 6%. An enemy can only have 1 stack of each elemental weakness at a time. Now, on cursory, just a very quick glance over, it might sound like your Flame, Shock, or Frost weakness only applies to critical damage for that element, but in reality, it is all damage. So that critical damage taken bonus, that applies to all damage, not just Flame, Shock, or Frost, depending on which weakness is up. That means you can have all 3 active at the same time for an increase of 18% additional critical damage taken. Now on the screen right now is a quick mathematical look at the bare minimum damage increase that you can expect to see from Elemental Catalyst, given of course the new Shadow Mundus strength, which is about 18%, with 21 points, 21% I should say, coming from Elfborn. Major Force and Minor Force active, obviously. You can tell here that Elemental Catalyst is quite a large DPS boost. In fact, it is comparable to having Major Slayer active pretty much at all times. So this is a very, very powerful set here, and the proc condition is actually very easy to achieve. The elemental weaknesses don't have a cooldown, so you can continuously refresh them every single second if you're running something like Force Pulse, which deals all 3 of the types of damage that are required to hit that 80% additional critical damage taken. So Elemental Catalyst will likely be making its way onto a healer using something like Force Pulse in order to proc all 3 elements, or alternatively, you could wear it on a necromancer like I have here, because necromancers do deal all 3 elemental types of damage. So just how broken is this set? Well, here is a sample parse here with Elemental Catalyst. Just broke 80k here. This is, by the way, with the nerfs that have come in, all the DPS nerfs, so the nerf to Sororia and the nerf to Bloodthirsty, for example. So we're still hitting very similar DPS running Elemental Catalyst as we were in Greyboar before all these various DPS nerfs came into play here. Our debuffs out, you can see here, the only ones that I really dropped was Shock Weakness here at about 96% uptime in an actual trial. That's not really going to make that big of a difference here. So you can essentially treat these as 100% uptime with all 3 weaknesses. Again, there is no internal cooldown on it. It's not like there's a 5-second or 10-second cooldown between each one. So you can continuously re-up them. You can see here Flame Weakness never went down. Frost Weakness never went down. Shock Weakness went down probably for a second or 2. Just because your skeletal pet actually doesn't end up proccing Shock Weakness, I believe. So there was a little bit of downtime on Shock Weakness, but still essentially it's 100% uptime on the 18% additional critical damage. That is not reflected in combat metrics because it is a debuff, and so combat metrics can't exactly take that into consideration here when it's calculating out the critical damage that you're dealing here. So 80k here with Elemental Catalyst. How does that compare to a more meta set like Spell Strategist? Well, you're taking a look at about a 4k difference here. So this is a 4.2k difference, so we pulled 57.8k running Spell Strategist. We were using Perfect Sororia here and Maw of the Infernal. Everything is as you would expect to see on your typical standard meta sort of Magicka Necromancer setup here, and we're still pulling ahead on an arguably support-oriented set here. So this set, if it releases onto live as it currently is absolutely broken, and it is going to be a set that will need to be on any organized trial group. Now, I do think ZOS is going to end up nerfing this set. A couple of ideas that I can think of how they're going to nerf it. First off is just reducing the value of the critical damage taken, obviously. cut it in half to 3%, so when you have all three up, it's only 9%. If they do that, and you can see the math on screen here, you can see that it is a smaller damage increase overall. It's still going to be necessary, I think, on those sort of score pushing and achievement hunting trial groups to kind of push out as much DPS as they can, but it is not quite as game breaking anymore here. The other alternative would be to add something like a cooldown between each application of weaknesses. So for example, these are up for 5 seconds. If you include like an 8-second cooldown, so they only have about a 62.5% uptime, now that basically decreases the effectiveness of the set. And again, if we do have this sort of 5 seconds with an 8-second cooldown, again, math is here on the screen, it is a drop from the 100% uptime on the 18%. A little bit more, obviously, than if they just cut the effectiveness down in half, just because the effective value is going to be a little bit higher. But, of course, it's still going to be a nerf, and I think they are going to introduce one of these two things. They're either going to cut down the damage taken debuff, or they're going to introduce a cooldown for each weakness when it can be applied. I think 8 seconds is probably a good happy middle ground. 10 seconds might be a little bit too much, but even a 10-second cooldown on a 5-second application would still be equivalent to essentially cutting its effectiveness in half, basically a 3% damage taken, critical damage taken debuff, rather than 6% that they currently have here. But that pretty much covers it for this video. Again, this is only the first week of the PTS, and I do expect them to nerf this set in week 3 or 4, depending on when they get around to it. So just be on the lookout for this set in the future. But definitely support roles, healers, and Magicka necromancers in particular. Definitely when this set comes out, I would recommend trying to farm for a complete set here, because this is, regardless of how much they nerf it, it is still going to be a damage increase across the board for both stamina and Magicka groups. So especially healers, I would recommend farming for this set once this DLC goes live. That's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.